Hello everyone. I hope you are all doing good. So I have my Visual Studio open. We are going to develop a temperature monitor UI in .NET MAUI. In this session, I will be deploying it to both Android emulator and in a Windows machine. So let's get started. So I'm going to create a .NET MAUI application. I'm going to name it temperature monitor app. I'm going to leave the framework as .NET 7. So the application is created. Let's just open the Android emulator. So I'm going to use this pixel with API 31. Just to make sure that the application runs properly, I'm going to deploy this application into the emulator. Meanwhile, I'm going to dock this Visual Studio to the left and the emulator to the right. We just have them both in our screen. Let's try to build this project. I suppose there was some issue. So I've initiated the build process. For developing this UI, we will be using this Syncfusion Radial Gauge for .NET MAUI. We will be customizing it to come up with this temperature monitor UI. So I'm just going to deploy this application to the emulator. Yeah, deployment is completed now. I'm just going to start the debugging. Yeah, that's nice. A barcode scanner. Good. Have you tried using this Syncfusion, barcode to generate? Because I think we have a barcode control. Yeah, so the application is deployed right now, and we could see that it is working fine. Moving forward, whatever we do this application, it's completely based on our code changes, whatever happened to this application. So just going to remove this default code in this application. So I'm removing the scroll view and I'm removing this codes in the code behind file. Uh, okay, like I said, for implementing this temperature monitor UI, we are going to use this Syncfusion Radial Gauge for which I'm going to install the NuGet package. I'm opening the NuGet package manager. I'm switching to this browse tab. And I'm going to search for Syncfusion MAUI Radial or Gauge, just like that. So this is the NuGet package in which we a different type of gauges would be available. So I'm choosing the project in which I'm going to install, and I'm choosing to install. I said I selected install. Yes, I'm choosing OK. Okay, it is installed. So this green mark stated it. Yeah, fine. So now we are going to include this XML namespace to access this radial gauge inside our design page. I'm going to name this XML namespace as gauge. CLR namespace colon syncfusion.mavi.gauges. That is from the assembly syncfusion.mavi.gauges. That's it. So now I'm going to include the radial gauge in the main page. SF radial gauge. Yes. Within which I'm going to add an axis. All the a radial gauge can have more than one axis. So all these axes should be added into this axis collection. So I'm going to define this axis collection in the design part. The radial gauge dot axis. I don't think you would need this word, I mean line wrap, because all the code, I mean this XML namespace is just in a single line, after which everything would be accompanied in this viewport. For the question from Andy, yeah. So within this axis collection, I'm going to include this radial axis. Yes. Now I'm going to customize this radial axis. I'm going to set its interval to be 10. And I'm going to set the minimum value of this radial axis to be -50. I'm going to set its maximum value to 150. Yes, I just missed one thing. To include or work with Syncfusion Mavi controls in a Mavi application, you must like register the handler in the main page. So I'm going to open the main Mavi program, and we need to register the handler in here within this constructor, like create Mavi app function. So I'm going to register it, configure Syncfusion core. Yeah, this is it. So this would include this namespace in here as well. So moving back to the design. So we have set the basic properties of this radial gauge, that is interval, minimum and maximum. So let's deploy this application and use the hot reload functionality to design further parts of this radial gauge. Yeah, for the question from Lionel. Yes, we need to add the license details, but I do not want to share my license key in this presentation. We would be displayed with a notification, I mean, an alert box that states us to include the license key, but we can skip that as of now. Yeah, we got it. Actually, this is what the application would look like when we use the Syncfusion component in the application and do not apply the license key. We may either have to claim the license key or bear with this message as of now. I'm going to ignore it. And in case if you would like to claim a license key, you can click on this link and go and claim one for you. So we could see the basic setup of this radial gauge inside our application. Let's start customizing this radial gauge. So I'm now going to disable the display of this axis line because we are going to design our own axis line for this radial gauge. So I'm going to use the property show axis line to disable that, and then going to set this property to false. And I'm going to right now we have just yeah, now it is reflected. Right now we have just one minor tick between the major ticks, and I'm going to include 9 minor ticks between the major ticks. So for which I'm going to use the property minor ticks per interval, and I'm going to set this to 9. And we are going to enable the animation, and I'm going to set it to true. And we are going to set this animation duration to 2.5 seconds. So that is equivalent to 2500, 2500 milliseconds. So this property accepts the value in milliseconds. So we have designed the radial axis, and we are going to customize the style of the major tick. So I'm going to customize the style of the major tick gauge radial axis, and I'm going to customize the major tick style. Yes, we are going to create a new radial tick style. Yes. And I'm going to set it the length of the major tick to 0.265. So the major tick is barely visible. I'm going to set the length unit to factor. This accepts two values, factor and pixel. The default value of this length unit is pixel. That is why uh, the major tick is barely visible, because 0.25, 0.265 pixel length would be very less. So factor refers to the length. I mean, when I set the length to 1, this major tick would reach the center of this radial axis. So that means 1. So I'm going to set, I had set the length to 2.265. I'm going to customize the color with the property stroke, and I'm going to set it to black. And I'm going to customize the thickness of this stroke using the property stroke thickness, and I'm going to set it to 1.5. So this is the style for this major tick, and we are now going to customize the style for the minor tick. I'm just copying and pasting the code, and I'm going to replace this major with minor. Yes. So I'm going to reduce the length of the minor tick. I'm going to set it to half of the length of the major tick, that is 0.13. Also, I'm going to remove the thickness of this minor tick. Going to leave it with the default thickness. This looks good. And we are going to have 5 different ranges. We are going to split this radial axis into 5 different ranges. To define the range, the individual range must be included into the ranges collection. So I'm going to define the ranges collection now. Within which I'm going to define 5 different ranges. So that is going to be a radial range. Start value of the first range is going to be -50. That is the start value of this radial gauge. And end value is going to be 0. And I'm going to fill this range with the color 2290C7. And I'm going to set its opacity to BF. And I'm going to use the fill property. The hexadecimal code BF is the opacity and the color is 2290C7. I think I should close this one for this changes to be reflected in here. Yeah, now we could see the changes in this UI. So now the width of the range is very small, and we are going to increase the width of the range, and we are going to set its width to the size of this major tick. So I'm going to set the start width to 0.265. That is the size of the major tick. No, that's not a start value. I mean start width. Yes. Then I'm going to set the end width to 0.265. Still, it is being very small. Like I said before, we need to set the width unit to factor. Right now, it is in pixel. So I'm going to set the width unit to factor. So it is filled. So for defining the other ranges, I'm going to just copy this range and paste it 4 more times. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Since these ranges overlap with each other, it's completely opaque. So we are going to customize the start and end value and the color, fill color for the other ranges. So start value of the second range is going to be 0. And the end value is going to be 10. It's going to be 10. Yeah. For the fill color, I'm just going to leave the opacity. And I'm going to fill it with the color 22C3C7. 22C3C7. Other things are the same. So for the third range, I'm going to set its start value to 10 and the end value to 30. And I'm going to fill this with the color 7BC722. 7BC722. Yes, we had defined our third range. For the fourth range, I'm going to set the start value to 30 and the end value to 40. And I'm going to fill this color with the color EEC222. And for the last range, the start value is going to be 40 and the end value is going to be 150. And the fill color is going to be EE4F22. So we have arrived at the design of this axis. Now we are going to include a pointer in this axis. Like I said before, this radial gauge can have more than one pointer. So I'm going to include a pointers collection and add our pointer into it. So gauge radial axis, and I'm going to define the pointers collection, and I'm going to include a needle pointer in it. Yes, this needle pointer. So it has included a needle pointer. I'm going to set its value to 22.5. And I'm going to fill this needle with the color F8B195. I'm going to use the property needle fill. I'm going to use the hexadecimal code F8B195. And I'm going to set the length of the needle to be 0.6. So the start width of the needle is going to be 1 and the end width is going to be 16. So I'm going to set it using the needle start width property. It's going to be 1 and needle's end width is going to be 16. Yes. So right now we have customized the needle part, but the knob looks in different with a black color. So now we are going to design a stylish knob for this needle. Initially, I'm going to fill this knob with a white color using the knob fill property. I'm going to set it to white. And I'm going to provide a stroke color for this knob. The stroke color is going to be same as the fill color of this needle. I'm going to copy the color code and I'm going to set this to the knob stroke. Yes. The stroke of the knob is barely visible. We are going to increase the width of the knob using the knob stroke thickness property. Knob stroke thickness. And I'm going to, sorry, my bad. This would accept the value 0.04. That's going to be the thickness. To further fine tune this design, I'm going to set the radius of the knob to be 0.1. Yeah, now the knob looks good. Now let's include a tail for this needle. And I'm going to use the tail length property to include a tail. I'm going to set it to 0.2. Yes, now we could see the tail. I'm going to increase the width of the tail. I'm going to set the tail width to be 16, which is the same as the width of the needle end. Now I'm going to fill this tail with the color we used to fill the needle. Tail fill with the same color I had copied. Yeah. Now this looks good. And then we are going to include two different annotations to display the value we see in that the pointer points to in this radial gauge. To include these annotations, I'm going to create this annotations collection. Radial axis dot annotations, within which I'm going to include the annotations. So that is of type gauge annotation. Gauge annotation. Right now, I'm going to include label as the content to this gauge annotation. So I'm going to customize the content. You can include any UA controls as an annotation to this radial gauge. Right now, my aim is to display a text, so I'm including a label in here. Label. I'm going to set its text to 22.5, the value which the pointer points to in the radial gauge. And I'm going to customize this text. I could see that these changes are not reflected in this UI. There might be some problem with the hot reload, but we can try to redeploy it to see this annotations in the radial gauge. But still, I'm going to define all these values for this annotations. And I'm going to set the font attribute of this annotation to be bold. I mean this label to be bold, and I'm setting the text color as black. So for the font size, I'm going to use the value 20. That is it. We have included one annotation, and I'm going to include one more annotation that says that the value mentioned in here is in degree Celsius value. So I'm just going to copy this gauge annotation part. I'm going to include one more annotation in this annotations collection. Here the text is going to state temp and degree Celsius. For this degree value, I have already copied this degree gulf from the internet. So this is the gulf to mention this degree. Yes, I have included it. So this text is not going to be bold, so I'm removing it. And this text color is going to be not black, and I'm going to customize it with the hexadecimal value F8B195, the one which we copied. But since we copied the degree value now, we need to type it now. F8B195. F8B195. Yes, it's right. And the font size is going to be 15. So we have included two different annotations of type label. Now let's try to restart this application to see if these annotations are included in the radial gauge. This should not take much time, I suppose. That's deployed. We could see that both the annotations are included but are placed at the center of the radial gauge. So we are now going to position these annotations. I'm going to set the position factor for this annotation to be 0.8. No, I'm trying to modify the entire collection. So this individual annotation should be placed at the position 0.8. Now it's relocated to the right side of the radial gauge. So I'm going to set its direction value to 90 to place it in the bottom. I'm going to set its direction value to be 90. So it is relocated to the bottom. Yes. So for this annotation, I'm going to place it at the position 0.4 in the midway, that is 0.8 divided by 2. So in a similar fashion, I'm going to set the direction value to be 90. Yes, it is placed in the bottom. Now we have completely achieved the design of this radial gauge. I think we might have missed to see this animation during the initial load. That is, we have enabled this loading animation, but it is not seen since the display of the alert box, which stated us to claim the license. So to initiate the re-rendering of this entire control, I'm just going to include this control into the stack panel, stack layout, that would cause the complete re-render of this control. Yeah, this is how the animation works. Since we had set the animation duration to be 2.5 seconds, it took that long to render. So I'm going to remove this to see the animation once again. Yeah, this is cool. Now we have successfully deployed this into this Android emulator. Now let's try to deploy the same control into this Windows application. And I'm going to stop it now. I'm going to set the target to this Windows machine. And I'm going to deploy it. Deployment is completed. We can expect the screen anytime. Yeah. Yes. That is it. The UI we expected is completely rendered in the Windows machine as well. In a similar fashion, you can deploy this application into this Mac Catalyst and iOS devices. So that is it for this webinar session. We have successfully completed implementing this temperature monitor UI in .NET MAUI. It's my pleasure.